MSRAC on Friday, December 10th. The first item on the agenda, actually technically the second, is the approval of the minutes of the October 15th, 2021 special meeting.
So moved.
So
I'll
Ronnie moved
second.
to approved. Steve, was that Steve who seconded?
Yeah.
Any discussion on the minutes? All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
I will abstain because I wasn't there. Any not approvals? Okay, the minutes are approved. Correspondence. We did have one letter that we can go over with the FEMA flood map revisions. Anything else, Tira?
Nothing that is standalone correspondence. Everything would have to do with an agenda item and
Okay, then
like
let's
that.
just, yeah, let's discuss it under the agenda item. Item 4, citizens' comments.
Wayne, would you like to be a citizen? I mean, you do have your own agenda item later.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Hey, good morning. I'm not a real citizen though, I guess. I live in Ashford, so.
I'm a citizen somewhere.
I don't think you have to be a resident to be a citizen.
Yeah, technically that item should probably be public comment, really.
Public comments? No, I don't have any other than, I guess I'm on the agenda a little bit later, so, or soon after.
Okay, yeah, actually you'll be the very next thing on the agenda because we launch right into number 5, committee business. And the first item on that is the Eastern Connecticut Land Bank.
And you are all set up to screen share, Wayne, whenever you're ready.
How to best do this? I have a shared screen. I've never done this, to be honest, not through Zoom. I'm ready, I guess. I can. I don't know.
So if you hover your cursor over the bottom of your screen, you should see an option for share screen.
In the middle.
And if you click on share screen, it'll show you all your open tabs on your desktop. And then you just select the one that you want to share.
Oh, I see. Okay. I had to back out of something here. Share screen. Oh, I have options. Awesome. Okay. And
We all have options.
has anybody seen it yet?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah, it looks like it's about to start. There you go.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay. You guys can see this okay then?
Perfect.
Yes, sir.
Oh, terrific. I feel confident almost. Hey, good morning, everyone. Thanks for letting us come. Mary Ann was going to be here. She had a conflict, so you're stuck with me. I wanted to share, we'll talk a little bit about what the Eastern Connecticut Land Bank is. I guess the easiest way to put it in a succinct form is what our mission is. And we try to stick very, very carefully to this. So we are partnering with municipalities in Eastern Connecticut to return the distressed, underutilized, blighted brownfield and historic properties to productive uses consistent with local plans of conservation and development. And I think it's a good mission statement, and you might find it familiar because it's what you guys have been doing on your own for many years now. So we're thrilled to have an organization now, I think, that can kind of expand what I think Thompson has been doing in many ways take advantage of a lot of other things, a lot of other opportunities and tools, excuse me, to accomplish this across all of Eastern Connecticut. So the presentation, I'm going to just quickly go into what a land bank is and what ECLB is, what our toolbox is, the things that make that give us the power to hopefully make some substantive changes to our region, our vision, and our challenges. We're a brand new organization, and so you'll see that we have quite a few challenges that we're trying to overcome as a nascent organization. And then lastly, and not least, I'd like to have a open discussion with you and get some input from you. We want to know, you've got some projects obviously underway. We want to know if there's a way for the land bank ECLB to help Thompson. And certainly the other side of this is we're coming to you to ask for your input, to your expertise as representatives of a municipality. How do you think what options are there for MSRAC, the town of Thompson, to help us? So how do we, how can you help us to help you, sort of thing? This should be the last slide maybe, right? But not in my opinion. I want to throw a thank you out there to MSRAC, because in a very real way, I think, I don't think Eastern Connecticut Land Bank would exist without you folks. You've been inspirational, to put it mildly, as far as your perseverance, I guess, your interest and your passion for your community. And, when Mary Ann and I had the idea to create a land bank for 5 years ago now, when the legislation was first being put forward that would enable land banks, I don't think we would have pursued it if it hadn't been, kind of the inspiration and the encouragement, I guess, of watching an organization like yours, where you've been participating for so long in something that doesn't have instant gratification. It's a hard slog to work on these projects. And so I just want to thank you up front for that. So does anybody not know what a land bank is, or what a brownfield land bank is?
I think you've educated us quite a bit on that over the years.
Yeah, I think, and I think I talked about it in one of the not too long ago at a MSRAC meeting, right? We talked a little bit about what the land bank is. Just to review, so these were not really even a thing in Connecticut until after 2017, when the legislature passed the law and the governor signed the law that allowed the creation of land banks. A land bank is not a land trust. It doesn't hold properties in perpetuity. Its idea is to do what you guys would like to see done in Thompson with 630 and with the river mill, have these properties repurposed and back on the tax rolls and playing a vital role in the community. We, in Connecticut, the odd thing, and I guess this is a fairly unique thing, the legislation enabled land banks as separate nonprofit non-stock corporations. In most states that have issues with properties across the Rust Belt, there's a lot of land banks that are their whole purpose is to clean up vast tracts of residential properties. And that's true even as close as Newburgh, New York. They have a land bank there that's very active on the Hudson River there. It's a town that's certainly seen better days, and it has a lot of vacant properties. And their land bank is a community-based one, and its goal is to clean up residential properties, sometimes knock them down, build other housing or whatever. But Connecticut was kind of the first state to authorize legislation that would create a land bank, that would create the possibility of forming land banks specifically to target brownfields. So we're not affiliated with any government agency, and that's the difference. Most of these other land banks are county government, quasi-government agencies, county-based, city-based, or something like that. So what we do is we want to help remediate and redevelop brownfields. We are the key thing about it, and this is part of the toolbox, we're eligible to participate in all kinds of brownfield grant programs, liability relief programs, which previously had only been available to municipalities. And as you well know, towns that are faced with a vacant property, a derelict property, every town wants to do something, somehow facilitate the cleanup and reuse of the property like that. And, you know, so what's the obvious thing? Well, you take a hold of it, you get title to it, and you start doing the hard work. Well, you're going to face a lot of headwinds when you're trying to clean up a property that is you know, in municipal hands. You're going to find all kinds of political headwinds. Nobody's going to want to have a town devote resources, financial or staff resources, to a property like that, and for good reason. Towns are not immune from potential liabilities. So the last bullet here, what we can do is protect municipalities from unexpected costs and liability, basically trying to find a cleaner, smoother way through for a community. What are we doing this for? You know, I think everybody in Thompson knows, right? It's not a hard sell to look at a property like the River Mill and say, you know, we don't want this to end up looking like the former Belden Corticelli mill. So you know, what I always like to throw a slide up when I talk to people about the value of brownfield redevelopment, a slide like this one that's, you know, shows the lights on in a place, because you pass by the River Mill, this you know, this large hulking mass with no lights on at night, and it's depressing, and it's such a complete transformation when it's being used and the lights are on. So just an inspiration. And if you know me, I don't like PowerPoints, so I like pictures instead. But anyway, so what can we do? What does the land bank do, or what are our some of the functions and activities that our organization can do? It's pretty much everything and anything that you could think of that would facilitate the cleanup and reuse of a property. So we can do the site assessments and planning. Preferably we'd be doing that using consultants as you know, to help us out. Structural analyses. Sometimes buildings, especially these historic mills, the environmental issues are not the main conundrum for a potential developer. It's a structural question. They've been you know, maintenance has been deferred a long time. Some of them have big roof leaks. If you look at the towers at the River Mill, there's trees growing out of the towers and things like that. And so those can't go on forever. And so conducting structural analyses is important. Historic preservation surveys are important because many of these are historic properties, and they need and they are eligible for historic preservation tax credits and things like that. But the surveys are necessary to do that, and sometimes to get them into maybe they need a listing on the state or federal register of historic properties. So that's an important thing. The third bullet item is maybe the biggest you know, function that we could perform, and that's actually acquiring a site. Previously to the before the legislation was passed, the state of Connecticut had really only one option with a few little small permutations to it. But effectively, if you had a tax delinquent property that was just lying there, some big industrial mess, the towns, you know, they pretty much were obligated to sell it at a tax sale if they wanted it to change hands, completely out of any control of the town, other than following the requirements of the how to dispose of a property using a tax sale. So it could have gone from one you know, absentee owner to another who has no intention of doing anything productive with it. So the land banks are enabled by this legislation to acquire properties by either direct sale. The town can sell the tax liens, and the land bank could foreclose on it. And there are other mechanisms, I guess, that are legal in nature, and I won't even get into them because I'm not qualified to talk about them. But there's a number of ways that a land bank can acquire a property. And once we have it, we can do all of the things that the town would like to do, or have done. So, keep it secure, button it up if it needs fencing, if it needs doors and window openings closed so that to keep vagrants and potential arsonists. It's not hyperbole. A lot of these mills are burned and things like that. So, we can do a lot of these things, and then we can get grants, we can remediate them, and then we can sell them for the benefit of the municipalities, all the while having the town as a partner, basically saying what the town wants and what it doesn't want. The land bank's goal is never to decide on its own what a property should be used for. Everything should be done in conjunction with the town. Educating.
But with no liability to the town, correct?
That's right. If the town doesn't own it and isn't doing these things, the land bank is taking on that responsibility. And fortunately, we also have, as the lawyers tell us, we have some fairly robust legal protections as a land bank. We would have to be grossly negligent as an organization in order to have any sort of liability. So, we're protected in many ways as long as we do our job. We're not taking on too much liability from that perspective. Education of basically anybody and everyone who has a stake in these properties and who either wants to do, wants to help, wants to see these properties fixed up and reused, or in some cases, educating the public when they're skeptical. That's a major function. Obviously, the town of Thompson has done some of that already with the River Mill, holding well-attended public meetings in the library, having presentations, having an open floor for anybody to ask questions. And I think that's been to the town's credit to do that, because it's been, sometimes these projects are, there's a lot of just rumors that spread around, a lot of misinformation around the towns about, who's doing what and what the ultimate, use of the property is. I've been in meetings where some of the craziest ideas about what actually is going to happen with these buildings. So it's good to make sure that all voices are heard and any misconceptions are dealt with. We can serve as liaison between the towns, the public, regulatory authorities, and other stakeholders. We can perform market analysis, resolve environmental orders and liens. This is a function that we wouldn't be doing necessarily, but we would, if once we get our coffers fairly filled with enough funding so that we can have our attorneys work on these things. Some of these properties have very convoluted ownership issues and liens and things like that. And that's an encumbrance that can prevent a property from being used. It may just lie there as, because it's just such a mess of legal issues. And so we understand that that's something that needs to be dealt with as well. And attorneys have a very vital role to play in that. And we intend to have, we have attorneys that provide us with some help now, mostly on a pro bono basis, right at the moment. But going forward, there's going to be an absolute necessity that we have attorneys on retainer that can help us address issues as they arise. We are able, just like a municipality or an owner, we can enter properties into environmental liability relief programs and secure transferable covenants not to sue, which is basically a no further action from a regulatory agency. So we can, the transferable thing there is key, that because when you've got a liability relief that goes with the property, then you can market that property, and it's like money in the bank for a potential buyer or investor. As I said, clearing titles, conducting public outreach, You know, these are things that Thompson's already very good at, and we want to take this and use it and use that example elsewhere. And ultimately, we can market the cleanup properties for sale and reuse. That means we can be meeting with prospective developers all along the process as the property is cleaned up and afterwards, if it's, you know, still in our control. Any questions about this? I know it was a lot on one slide, and I'm sure I'm forgetting some things. Tira, are there some things that I should have mentioned?
Sorry, I was flipping back and forth between screens. No, I mean, I think that covers the general function of the land bank. I mean, in terms of this meeting, and obviously I'm kind of wearing two hats here, right? Because I'm on this board and I'm advisory to MSRAC in local staff. The main point here, as we discussed last week, the board members, is to use MSRAC as a sounding board for as we're ramping up now and going to be going directly to municipalities to ask for support. What is obvious to us is that we need to be able to describe in more specific detail what that support would get. So this slide here has all the things we could do, but we are not necessarily set up to do all of these things right now because we're at our initial phases.
And those are slides I have coming up. I just wanted to make sure that I touched on the things that we would be doing or could be doing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yes. Then. Well, then I won't steal any more of your thunder. I'm going to put myself back on mute.
No, it's fine. And feel free to jump in as I go through those. But that's sort of my next thing. I'll go to that. So just a real quick introduction to what the land bank is. As I said, it's a nonprofit under federal law. We have a board of directors with 11 members, and we're certified by the Department of Economic and Community Development as a Connecticut Brownfield Land Bank. That certification has to be renewed, but it's something that allows us to do all of these functions. We are focused entirely on the communities of Eastern Connecticut, and that's a really, I think, an important distinction for a bunch of reasons. Eastern Connecticut's towns are generally smaller. They often, some of the communities are poorer and probably disproportionately affected by brownfields on a scale that most other communities in Connecticut don't see. And North Grosvenor-Dale is probably a poster child for that, but you don't have to, you can go into other communities in Plainfield and Killingly and in Putnam, where if you've got a mill that is the centerpiece of a community and it's empty and it's falling down and potentially going to be demolished, it's going to have a very large effect on the community. But in contrast, if you were in some of the other industrial towns, the larger cities in Connecticut, they may have some neighborhoods that might be affected, but maybe not to the degree. The other difference is most of those bigger communities have staff, they have some of the potential to do some of this work on their own. I will say that right now there are only 3 certified land banks in Connecticut, and ours is the only one that's really set up to do the kind of work that the land bank legislation was intended to do. The other 2, one that's based in Hamden and one that's based in the Naugatuck Valley, they morphed from for-profit businesses. Well, the one in the Naugatuck Valley was basically a reconstituted for-profit consulting business, and the one in Hamden was an outgrowth of a community development agency. And they are, I don't think that they are doing what the legislation was really intended to do.
But did they come about because of the legislation, or were they already there in some municipal, obviously not in a municipal form? So they must have come about because of the legislation?
Yeah, well, they came about as the entities they are now as because of the legislation.
Right.
But the one in Hamden was sort of a quasi-municipal agency basically, and once you're certified, you're not geographically limited anywhere. If they could, in theory, go anywhere in the state to perform their functions. But very early on, it became apparent to me that these organizations were taking advantage of a nonprofit status and the land bank legislation to carve a niche a little deeper into some of their markets they'd already been serving as for-profit entities.
Do you think it's a bad thing totally taking advantage? In other words, kind of like a loophole in the regulation?
Not so much, Bernie, that I don't want to, I'm not trying to disparage them. I'm just saying that
Yep.
their focus, when I brought a project to one of them recently in Western Connecticut, and I basically handed them a project that was sure to get a grant and was already, it was a mill that was already developed, but it was going to be a feather in their cap. And basically they looked at it not from a need perspective, but from a profitability perspective.
Right.
Just because they're a nonprofit doesn't mean that they're not looking at the bottom line. And of course, our organization needs to be very aware of that as well. But it's I think our fundamental difference is that we approach this thing. None of us on the board are looking to turn this into some sort of an organization where we're going to be making a lot of money on it. This was done out of a need, out of a perceived need across the region for an organization like ours to partner with communities and do some of the heavy lifting. It's a great piece of legislation that enabled this, and it's a little bit of a surprise and maybe discouraging to see that other parts of the state haven't stepped. There aren't people that are stepping forward to do this, and it may just be because of one of the things I mentioned, which is a lot of these communities, they don't, you don't have a lot of staff members and people that can devote the kind of time that's necessary to do this work. Now, a city the size of Norwich or Hartford, they're doing some of this work, but they're a different animal. They've got brownfield issues, but they do have staff. And in the case of Hartford, they have, they have a whole, quasi-governmental development agencies that are, city affiliates that do a lot of this work and are eligible for a lot of grants as well.
Right. So they don't really need the legislation.
They didn't need it as much, correct?
Yeah.
And to that point, they didn't get certified as, there are no nonprofit organizations in those towns that are certified as brownfield land banks. But as municipalities, they're doing some of the work already. Our focus is on towns like Thompson and Putnam and Killingly and Plainfield and Griswold and Wyndham, and that have brownfield issues that need to be there's a need that's been driven for decades, and there has not been a solution, and I think we're it. So that's a key thing, is that we're focused on Eastern Connecticut. Our board of directors, you'll see some familiar names there. There's a pretty heavy Thompson connection here, obviously, and as I said, Marianne and I wouldn't probably have even started this if it weren't for Thompson and you guys. So it's a very strongly Northeastern centered organization. That's not to say this is our only area. We're doing some work for Stonington right now as well. So we want to cover this whole eastern swath. Our first projects, we got out a $200,000 assessment grant for the command site in Moosip. We helped Stonington obtain a grant, a little less than that, I believe, for property on the Pawcatuck River, right on the state line, in this called the Stillmanville Mill site. Unfortunately, the mill was demolished a few years ago. It was beyond any help. It was a real big loss. Cool mill was built in the 1830s, so it was pretty old. And then we're currently helping all these other towns with, to the best of our ability. The board members are going and helping out these towns with some of their issues, working with the town residents, the town staff and state agencies. So we're working a lot of these sites kind of behind the scenes, and we're here today, you know, I'm here today. I mean, I can speak for the board in that 630 Riverside Drive is a site that we would love to help Thompson find solutions for going forward.
Are taxes owed on that?
I don't know what Tara,
Yeah, they are off the top of my, and it's not, I mean, it's a lot, but it's not as much as you might think. Off the top of my head, I want to say it's about 40,000. The issue for us, and I think we've discussed this before, is not that we couldn't do something with it because of the tax arrears. We could. It's the connection to 929.
Right, exactly. We don't want to screw that up.
Right. So once 929 resolves itself completely in terms of the sale, and
Yeah,
again, we've discussed this before, the gloves
Right.
come right off.
Right. Thank you. Yep.
so
Bill Sites? It's on Zoom. Do you want to hop on? I can send you the link.
I thought it said that it was in the same room and on Zoom when I just read this.
Oh, yeah, Rainey, I heard you. That was
Oh,
my mistake
sorry.
because I didn't change it on the second page of the agenda. If you look on the first page of the agenda, it does say Zoom. That's my bad.
I'm not muted.
No, you're not muted.
Another meeting.
Well. Well, while there's this pause, I wouldn't say I'm thrilled with the Eastern Connecticut Land Bank, what they're trying to accomplish, the grassroots effort. And it's so true what Wayne said about, the small towns just lack that, we need to work together. No one town has the staff or the expertise to take on these big projects when you just have such small towns. So
yeah,
I applaud.
we have, we are definitely welcomed when we go to these towns. Nobody's, they may be skeptical of our ability to succeed, I guess, is the one thing that we're trying to overcome, but nobody is unwilling to entertain, listening to us talk and having us help them out. So it's a problem that's pervasive in all of our communities, even towns that you may not think about them so much as having brownfield sites. But a town like Brooklyn, for example, has an old mill site, along the Quinnebog River. Killingly has a bunch of them. They've had they've had some serious fires recently. There are very few communities that don't have issues. I live in Ashford, and we have a 300-acre brownfield site that was part of a federal Superfund program cleanup. And you wouldn't think of it, but it actually goes into Willington a little ways too. 300 acres is a tremendous piece of property that has potential, but it's been contaminated for many years. It's in the process of being cleaned up, but the land bank may even be able to help Ashford for an issue like that.
Have you been able to get some seed money, like to get any paid staff or anything yet? Or are you still
What
working
an
on that?
excellent segue, Janet.
I couldn't have designed that any better, Janet. Thank you. So money is the key, and for any kind of enterprise, obviously. So we have all of these, early successes, I will call them. We're pretty new, so getting grants and being able to start to tackle some of these issues is great. However, I'll tell you what, the person who was the primary author of the legislation that enabled land banks is Gary O'Connor, who some of you I think know, because I think he's done some work for the town of Thompson. Perhaps not, but I believe he has done some work. He's an environmental attorney, and he authored the legislation. When we asked him, he came and told us, gave a presentation actually to ECLB before we were ECLB. We were just kind of in a fact-finding session. And we asked him that question. We said, so who can run this and who can do the work of this? And he said, somebody who has the time and doesn't need the money. And we all looked around and said, well, that doesn't describe anybody in this room or anybody that we know for that matter. And so the other alternative is somehow you need to find the money to pay somebody to do a lot of the work. So this slide basically kind of shows some of the challenges that we're facing. As you guys know from your involvement in these brownfield projects, assessment and remediation is very complicated and costly. It takes years for many sites to get cleaned up. Their regulatory issues are very difficult. There's state and federal regulators that get involved. And something will crop up that you don't even anticipate, like FEMA suddenly telling you that the floodplain is going to rise 7 feet and suddenly and swamp your first floor of River Mill. And these are all issues that have to be worked through, and the cleanup issues always run into these roadblocks, and you have to find a way through them. It's a very cumbersome, time-consuming, and costly process. Administering the grants, if you get a grant to do the initial assessment, for example, on a brownfield site, requires a lot of time. Most grants that are granted by DECD, for example, you're limited on how much of that grant money can be used for administrative expenses. It's usually 5%, no more than that. Sometimes it's less than that because you use up that 5% just on having your attorneys look over some of the agreements and stuff like that. So there's virtually no appreciable amount of money that can be used to pay a land bank to do some of the administrative functions of administering a grant. The third bullet, we have no staff. Everything that all the functions and activities that a land bank can do that I put in the early slide, all of the things that we can do by law that we're enabled to do, we have no staff to do it with. And no money to pay anybody to accomplish these. Everything we're doing right now is just basically volunteers. So it's the people that you saw, the 11 people on that list basically are the people who are trying to do all of these things while, having our own lives and managing our own jobs and things like that. And then there's functions of the land bank, just administrative functions, keeping up with reporting requirements to the state and all of that stuff. And we don't have any other sources of funds right now. I will say that we are trying doggedly to come up with money every way we possibly can. And we, as a nonprofit entity, we can go after funds we can go after philanthropic gifts. We qualify for, as I said, we qualify for grants the same way municipalities are, but very few of them provide the seed money that Janet mentions. We don't have that at this time. So one of the ways that we are going to be searching for, and we are searching for financial assistance is directly from the towns that we help. We would be looking to we're seeking financial assistance from Thompson and all of the towns in our region, and particularly the ones that we want to help and are helping already, so that we can fund a salary, benefits, and business expenses for a full-time executive director. The right person, if we can get enough money to hire the right person, they can do a lot of the heavy lifting. They can guide the board of directors in doing all of the other functions. They can handle a lot of the administrative capacity. If done right, they can do a lot of the fundraising to keep themselves employed and raise enough funds for us to tackle other issues. And we can push that money out to the communities as needed, not just push it out there, but have a staff member who's sort of dedicated to helping. As I mentioned, legal expenses and other professional expenses, title search companies and things like that. We've already had hundreds of hours of pro bono services dedicated to us. And one of those big things for the command site in Moosup was to a negotiated agreement with the command corporation. We got a $200,000 assessment grant, but they have several $1 million in escrow that's supposed to be used for cleanup there. They don't have to clean up the entire property or the properties around them. And so we're trying to fill the gap so that their funds can be leveraged to the greatest extent. To do that, we are trying, and it's been a little bit of a battle with them because, they're a business and they're looking out for themselves. We've had attorneys advise us on how to go about entering into a memorandum of understanding with the command corporation for that site, so that we use whatever grant monies we get to the greatest advantage, and we leverage their funds to the greatest advantage to make the property most desirable and give it the greatest chance of redevelopment. Sometimes our goals there are not aligned with theirs, and if an attorney's not involved with that, we are basically flying blind if we don't have those. And right now we've been very happy to receive all of these pro bono services, but we can't do that forever. And then lastly, there's all administrative expenses, all sorts of things that a business would need to do. And there's some startup costs that have been deferred. The things that we haven't even been able to do because we don't have the money. So those are the things we'd like to spend money on. And I think the last slide here is basically what would our staff and board members do? What would be the, and I guess it's even a bigger topic than that. What would ECLB do to Thompson? What would be the return on a municipal investment in ECLB? Well, what we'd love to do is to be able to continue to assist Thompson with its ongoing projects. You guys, because you've been so generous with your own personal time, and Janet's the greatest example right now is Janet's recent involvement with this whole floodplain issue with FEMA. That's invaluable, having that kind of expertise. Not every community is going to have the kind of expertise available to run in and solve these issues on behalf of a prospective redevelopment project. And so, we want to be able to be that entity that can plug in the expertise that's necessary whenever a project is runs into an issue, and they all will. We'd love to help with grant assistance for, going forward. I think there's a really nice partnership ability there. We did it in Stonington. We've done it in Plainfield. I was doing it before there was an ECLB with other towns. We'd like to be, offer some consulting. Like I said before, we can participate in public outreach. Love to be able to do that to the extent that it's beneficial. Leveraging private funds. This again gets into this whole negotiating with private developers side of things and finding a way that it best serves the community. And I think we've got some good people on the board, and hopefully an eventual executive director who can serve as a liaison between the public and the state, the different agencies, that sort of thing. And then lastly, and this is totally open to discussion, but I don't know what other properties there are. 630 always comes to mind as a property that, because of the remediation that's necessary there, with the right resources, the land bank could acquire that, could clean it up, and then help to market it on behalf of the town, or whatever the town wants to see there would be an option there. That's a perfect example of a project that a more robust land bank, when we are a more robust land bank, it would be a perfect project for us. And there's other things too. And again, Tira, if you have any other input on things that we as a land bank can do for Thompson in particular, that would I welcome that.
Well, I think in general terms, you've covered all that. And again, this is a group that has some sophisticated understanding of, what these projects involve already, right? So the question then, for me, taking it back to the practical purpose of this presentation, is twofold. What does this group see as open questions that the land bank should expect from other towns? In this presentation, where do they think the weak links are, or what needs to be fleshed out to make that benefit to communities more clear? And then as a secondary, because this organization has no budget, possibly endorsing through a formal statement, the land bank for when you and Marianne and I go to NECOG to discuss the fundraising aspect. We talked about the towns where we have strong relationships being sort of the early adopters to seed the tip jar. And I'll have that discussion with the Economic Development Commission next week, because they do have a budget, and this seems to me within their mission, but that's their decision. But so that to me is the real purpose here, is having these municipal representatives, even though they're volunteer municipal representatives, tell you where they see the need as greatest, or again, what kind of questions you might expect from other towns.
Thank you. That's great. I'm at a disadvantage. I've never served, on a town committee directly, and I don't know a lot about how the workings of local government. And so, Tara, thank you very much for that. You mentioned the NECOG connection. One of the things that came up at the last ECLB board meeting was, how do we approach the towns? And so we talked about different approaches, and one of them though was to go to NECOG and meet with the municipal representatives that are at NECOG as the first step. But ultimately, as Tara said, we're going to ask the towns for funding. She made a very good point about having it go through the Economic Development Commission if they're in each town, potentially. Sometimes we're going directly to the boards of selectmen or the Board of Finance, but definitely interested in anybody's input on how you think the best way to go about asking for funds. I like Tara's seeding the tip jar.
I think the presentation, the PowerPoint presentation is really good, but I think a question that everybody would ask was, how much money do you need for the setup? What are you shooting to have? An income of a couple $100,000 a year, and so divided by whatever 20 towns is X amount, or some percent you think you can fundraise. And so maybe just, people are going to want to know, well, what numbers are you talking?
Yeah. We didn't throw any numbers out today up front, but we've certainly thought about this, and the numbers that the minimum numbers that I think are necessary, based on speaking to other nonprofits, to get an executive director as the first critical step to accomplishing our mission, is somewhere in the neighborhood of $150,000 to $200,000 a year, which would pay a nice salary for somebody who's truly qualified to do the work, pay for their benefits and expenses, and also cover potentially up to $50,000 in legal fees that we are liable to incur. I mean, I have no idea, we can't predict what that would be, but that as a bare minimum, I think, is where we would like to be. Could we function without it? We certainly could, and we could conceivably hire a part-time executive director if we didn't have enough funding to pay for a full-time, and skimp a little bit on benefits and things. But that seems to be like setting ourselves up for a long slog, right, where if we can get the infusion of money between now and next year, enough so that we can hire, maybe by the spring or summer of next year, we have a full-time executive director on staff. We could do all of the things that are in this presentation.
Yeah, and that's not a huge amount of money. So I think that's important for people to understand. I mean, that the towns are pretty cheap, and they're not gonna want to pitch in much, but
yeah, if you spread it out enough,
right.
I guess the question is, it's a cart before the horse sort of thing. We don't have a staff member that we can immediately say, when you pay this money, you're going to immediately be able to tap into all the expertise that we're going to promise you. we need the money to hire the person to get up to, to get that person up and running, coordinating the board and maybe getting other volunteers, maybe even some part-time staff and on-call contracts with experts that we can tap into when the need arises. If a community calls us with a specific issue, suddenly an environmental issue pops up, or even, the thing, and I hate to keep pointing to this, but it's such a great example, the floodplain issue, Janet. If you weren't there early on and guiding, and frankly, Tira too, because Tira did all this legwork to figure out, the logistics, I guess, and of how the FEMA floodplain mapping was being revised. A lot of communities aren't going to have that, but that's exactly the kind of expertise we would like to be able to have on call as an organization, to be able to plug into any particular problem, whether it's floodplain issues, whether it's planning and zoning issues, whether it's environmental, whether it's historic preservation, you name it.
But
Yeah.
you do identify a weak point, which we already know, which that there is sort of a donut hole in between when we're able to accomplish what we're proposing with the funding we're asking for and what we're able to accomplish now. And I do think it's a fair question for towns to have as well. Yeah, we get that this might be a benefit down the line. And here's the response I would have if I were a skeptic, right? Maybe we'll buy in once we see that there's some success, but right now, what's the benefit to me? So part of what I would like to pose to this group, although I think that we have batted this around a little bit, Wayne, is that what is that bare minimum, right? Because we have an ask, but we might not make that ask. So if we don't make that ask, we're still going to have to provide something to the contributors. And how do we do that? Now, and I always go back to the same thing because it's sort of my wheelhouse, which is, well, there's the ability to, for example, meet with a group like this in some town and discuss general strategies to help them focus. That's a fairly easy lift compared to some of the things that we're talking about. But I think we have to identify those things, even if they put a burden on us. So, but the question then goes back to these guys. What are those things? What is really valuable, even at the sort of base level?
Right.
This may be kind of naive, but what about the big players nationwide? Like the Gates Foundation, and other billionaires who are giving money. Is there an avenue to approach those organizations and those people? This seems like kind of an ideal thing for some of the purposes of some of those organizations.
I think that's not a naive question at all. In fact, it was very early on, we realized that a single infusion of money by a wealthy, philanthropist could be a game changer for us. And so our thoughts early on were, what organization like that exists, or what entity like that exists that has some sort of a connection to Eastern Connecticut? I don't think that I may be wrong, but I don't think that it would be a fruitful effort if there wasn't some connection of some kind.
In other words, they're getting so many requests from so many different directions. How do you stand out unless there's a connection?
Well, yeah, that's kind of our thought. And to be totally honest with you, so the American Rescue Plan, ARPA money has been, funneled out to the communities, and the communities have been trying to decide how to spend it. Plainfield, because we got this grant for the command site in Moosup, we had the initial thought, and Mary Ann set this up. We actually went to the Board of Selectmen and pitched, asking them for a fairly good chunk of that money that would allow us to basically do all of these tasks for them, and specifically so that we could help them with two of their brownfield projects that are ongoing, the Interroyal Mill site right behind the town hall in Plainfield, and the command site that we had gotten the grant for them. We made the case that we've got this grant, we're going to be doing all of this work on behalf of the community, and we'd like to do even more. And we'd like to see, the town step up with some funds. And by the way, you've got this funding that came, this ARPA money that you're trying to find. And it was a totally legitimate expense to spend on it. And we asked for a lot of money. We asked for $300,000 from them over 2 years. And with the idea being that at least a third of the time our executive director would be spending specifically in Plainfield. And that would have been a huge game changer. And they turned us down. And it wasn't because of the amount. It was because their board of selectmen felt that if we gave it to this nonprofit, we'd have to get it to every nonprofit. And I'm not sure if they just didn't want to see the benefits we were trying to bestow upon their community. But I didn't feel like we were any nonprofit. We were a nonprofit coming, bearing gifts directly to the community, doing the heavy lifting for the community.
Yeah, that was a pretty specious argument. I mean, that was obviously somebody who just plain old didn't want to have to think about that particular expenditure. I mean,
yeah, I think specious is a perfect word for it. It was very disappointing. And, we asked for any amount that they were willing to give. And at that point, they just turned it down entirely.
Charlene had a question too. I know she popped me a note in the chat.
Okay.
It might be a dumb question, but is there any way that Mr. Gumpert, by any chance, the people that are coming in to look at these buildings, once they're kind of secured in, could they give money in some way? Because in reality, you're helping them work through getting a plan or getting the building that they want to purchase. Is that unheard of, or is that an option, or is that?
Yeah, it's not unheard of, or it's a great idea actually. And we, to that point, when the town of Thompson applied for the bar grant and got that, there was a cash match, I believe, of 10%. Is that right, Janet? Do you know?
I believe it was 10%.
Yeah, Gumpert's company put in 17,000.
Right. So the total budget was 187,000 for the bar grant. So the expectation certainly for a developer who's asking a lot of a community, and Mr. Gumpert's going to be continuing to ask the community for other things. It's absolutely appropriate, I think, to ask of these companies, to contribute. We're still at, and I think that's a great point that we will do going forward. Absolutely. For them to be convinced that that's a good investment, there still needs to be this direct connection. So right now, even the command site in Moosup, we've got a grant. There is no developer waiting in the wings for that project. We would absolutely tap into it if there were. We would expect, if they had a purchase and sale agreement in place, they had a development plan, we would already be asking them for help, financial help to help them. But right now, that's not a reality there. In Thompson, going forward, certainly on any brownfield site in Thompson, we would certainly look to those folks to contribute.
Yeah, and just as you guys know, I have done a lot of different kinds of fundraising. Part of it is how you strategize it, right? And I have suggested some steps for the land bank, which includes, going to the 4 communities that we have the strongest relationships with first, and then going to NECOG to try to create escalating levels of peer pressure for municipalities to buy in. I expect that will leave a deficit. To my way of thinking, whatever deficit that leaves, that's when you start going out to the private sector a little bit to say, hey, we're here, because the private sector gets a tax write-off as well, right? So, creating that network of invested partners in the nonprofit, I think, is sort of the way to go. But you also have to identify those developers. And in some cases, you know, those relationships might be fragile or sketchy in a way that our relationship with Gumpert is not, right? Not all developers have the kind of forward thinking and positive communication lines directly with the municipalities that we've created here. So, you know, those are all factors.
Here's a pretty basic idea. What about an ad in the Turnpike Bar and the Shopper's Guide directed towards the people in the 10-town area who, of course, it's not the whole 10-town area, just those two publications, but the people who do have money and are wealthy. A blurb introducing the land bank, and with a link to a website if there is one yet, and if not, I could certainly help quickly put one together. To try to raise some local interests from people of means.
Honestly,
No.
Bernie, the way that we should have done that, but we didn't get the start on it, would have been to do a direct campaign, a direct letter campaign during this month when people are scrambling to spend their charitable dollars
Right.
to get their tax write-offs.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah.
We didn't do that. And it's too late to do that exactly now, because in order to do that effectively, you've got to buy mailing lists and stuff like that. I mean, that whole end of fundraising and development is exactly the kind of thing that an executive director would be,
Right.
you know, an appropriate person to accomplish. You know, so we don't have that resource. Those lists don't come cheap. So the good ones, the good lists. But it's not a bad concept, right? It's just that we are only now getting to the point where we are ready to pursue the fundraising. It's just the timeline was not the best for us in terms of taking advantage of the best practices.
We were also, the command project, even though it hasn't even kicked off yet, what took up an inordinate amount of our time because of the negotiations we were doing with the Command Corp, and then to go to the town of Plainfield, and I guess I can't overstate the importance of, you know, not getting an infusion of money from the town of Plainfield. In many ways, because it's our first project, it's probably the most important thing we have is to have that project be a success so that we can take it on the road and use it as a selling feature when we do go to philanthropists and foundations and anybody else that we're going to be asking for funds. Towns, everybody's going to need to see some proof that we can accomplish the things that we say we're setting out to do. And we're not at that stage yet. You know, when I put up our successes slide today, it basically just said, you know, we've gotten some grants, and that's where we are right now. We have all kinds of promise, and we're sure we can do some great things on behalf of the communities, but we don't have an example to point to, a success story yet. And I think that's going to be key for going to, you know, to wealthy donors, et cetera.
I also think that, I know you said 200,000, but maybe I would even shoot 250, 300, because it seems like we always have to get somebody part-time, and we really need a full-time person. So why go in for exactly what we need? Go in for a little more so that they would be like, well, we can't give you 250, but we can give you 200. You know what I'm saying? We always cut ourselves short every single time. And then we expect somebody to do full-time work on a half-a-time pay.
Stretch goals are good, Charlene. That is an excellent strategic point.
We're going to try for as much money as we can possibly get,
Right.
from every source that we can get, because we you know, we're going to be hamstrung, I think, for the foreseeable future. What people should recognize too, though, is that if we can get over this hump, which is going to be, you know, as little as maybe 2 years, and as many as, well, who knows when we'll be over it, but it could be several more years beyond that, of where we're really destitute, not being able to get done what we want. at some point, we hope to be self-sustaining. That's not to say we're not going to be going and getting grants and things like that. But one of the great things about being a corporation is that we can actually, once we take title to a property and clean it up using grant money and other funding, we can realize a profit from the sale of that property. So if we get a property from a town that's, you know, completely unworkable, nobody wants it, and we acquire it for $1 or for nothing, and or we foreclose on a lien, and we do all of the heavy lifting, we do the cleanup, and somebody comes in and actually now pays what its appraised value is, we can get some money from that. We can also participate with communities in future tax revenue sharing programs. The legislation allows us to create agreements with towns where one of them, so they call the 550 program, where for the 5 years after a property is sold, 50% of the tax revenue would go to the land bank. And that would allow us to continue, our mission. So there's other, I know Tira probably has all kinds of other ideas about it, and there's other things that are legal, I guess. It's not my arena, but I do know there's a lot of other options for raising money, and I'm not being facetious. I think we're going to go for every penny we can get. But Janet's question right up from the very beginning, how much were we going to ask for? That's sort of the key thing. And I don't know, this is all uncharted territory for me. We don't know how much to ask for at this stage, what would be considered appropriate and doable by communities. We think it's different for each community. We think it's going to be tied to what they can expect to get from us in the next 12, 18 months or more. Everybody's going to be the decision makers in each town, I think, are going to be different in how they look at that. And
that's a shame that two of our decision makers are first selectman and Ken, who is our alternate member. None of them, I don't believe, are in the meeting today.
Not today.
Which is unfortunate for this type of presentation.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, I'm going to bring this issue to EDC next week, because EDC does have a budget. And I am going to make some suggestions as to what I think that level would be, which I think for the town of Thompson would be 10. Because for a number of reasons. Now, EDC may balk at that. They may think that it's too much of their annual fiscal year budget, but I suspect they won't. That's the discussion they have to have. But that's so again, talking about that seeding the tip jar strategy, if we can secure that base from the 4 towns with which we have the closest relationship, and that is Thompson, Putnam, Plainfield, and Killingly, and then go into that NECOG meeting, as I've suggested to them, that does create peer pressure on the other towns, especially if there are endorsements to present. So we're getting back to that with this committee. That's the endorsement, I think, that we're really looking for. I guess a letter signed by Janet saying that you support the mission. I'm sure that I can get a similar letter from the Board of Selectmen in this case, especially since we're not asking for general funds. And then that also creates a way that towns can see a way to take it out of their own budgets as well.
Well, that sounds like a good specific action. Can we have a motion for the MSRAC committee to send a letter of endorsement?
So moved.
Seconded. Wayne, another thought. No, go ahead with this motion. Let's.
Well,
get
any
rid of the
further,
motion
any
first.
discussion on this motion, or what should be included in the letter?
No, I just had a separate idea, but it should wait till after the motion.
Who
Okay.
made the motion in the second? Was it Bernie and then
Bernie.
Steve?
I made the
Yes.
motion.
Right.
So all in favor of MSRAC submitting an endorsement letter for the Eastern Connecticut Land Bank to support their mission that they can use at NECOG, or I suppose other towns, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we'll start working on a letter.
Thank you. That's great. I had, well, Steve, you had another comment?
Just again, a kind of naive thought, but since you're a nonprofit, I wondered about memberships like the Wyndham Land Trust. They kind of do the same thing with land that we're trying to do. Well, we're going even beyond that with the land bank, but they seek donations, but they also have membership. And if you sought, say a $50 membership times 1,000, that's a pretty good start. Just wondered if it was a thought that
It's been suggested. We haven't explored it much at all.
This is an area where I also have some experience because of my time in public radio, and managing a membership database is a job. Because there's a whole process that goes into soliciting every year, deciding what the benefits for the members are. So I think that's a down the road, Steve. Because membership to something like, say, TLGV, they're able to, say, do events, right? Ticketed events, maybe, where members get in. The benefit for membership is a clearer path. I think that would be stickier for this group, so I think that's definitely more of a down the line.
Okay.
Even if it's not called membership, like I think of the French River Connection, which I know they just kind of disorganized themselves, but they weren't really members. They just hit everybody up for like $50 a year, $100 a year. So they didn't really offer anything other than that they were running their programs to clean up the river.
Yeah, but that's getting back to that direct appeal kind of thing.
Yeah,
and
it is.
The whole schmear, the databases, who's sending the letters, who's sending the follow-up annual letters. And there's an entire level of strategies around that where, oh, here's what you donated last year, but for 5% more, we can do this much more work. So that's a job, that's development.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I think maybe I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Steve. Was that Steve?
No, that was Wayne, I think.
Oh, go ahead, Wayne.
Okay. I think that in the maybe nearer term, we would be, one of the things I'd like to do is, and it maybe ties into what Bernie suggested, which is, ads in the Turnpike Buyer, is the outreach that we need to do to educate people about our existence and what we intend to do for their communities. That can be coupled with some more informal asks, I guess. If we can do some, maybe hold some public meetings, put some ads in, and maybe we get, philanthropists to attend. Maybe we just get, more of the rank and file people around the region who are very interested in their communities to come and learn about what we hope to accomplish. We're not quite at the stage yet where we can do this, but we should be there next year. And that's something I think we should shoot for, because I think educating the public about what our mission is and what we are doing in the region is going to be important, and it'll kind of permeate through the community, and hopefully, maybe bring some benefits that we're not even thinking of at this point. Membership, potential board members in the future. I mean, we've tapped into basically people that we know to create the board of directors. We need to grow and become a more robust organization with more involvement. And I think getting out there in the community might serve multiple purposes, including fundraising for that. I wanted to mention one other thing that's not fundraising, but I wanted to mention it to you guys in particular. If you're not aware, the federal infrastructure bill has $1.5 billion for brownfields. I don't know how many of you were aware of this. This is money that's going to be funneled through EPA for grants for brownfield assessment and cleanup. it represents about 15 years worth of grants that are going to be pushed out in a very, very short period of time, with apparently a lot fewer strings attached. Cash matches and things like that might be going away for some of these. They basically want to get this money spent, and that's a tremendous amount of money that's being pushed out for brownfields. Some of that hopefully gets down to the state levels as well, and maybe gives increases the coffers of organizations like DECD. We as an organization, the ECLB, first saw that and said, hey, if you're kind of opening up the purse and you're loosening the purse strings, making it easier, can we get some seed money from you, EPA? And we went to EPA and they said, no, that's not what we're going to be able to spend it on. Well, we haven't given up on that yet. I mention it to you guys because it's such a transformational thing, and it's not going to last for all that much time. I don't think in our lifetimes, we're ever going to see a better time to be in the business of trying to clean up brownfield sites. So Thompson should basically be paying very close attention to this for any of the brownfield sites. If there's some public money that can be used to help, make 630 or the properties around the River Mill, successful, or other brownfield sites that might be in town. They don't have to be as consequential as those. This is the time to keep that in mind. The state itself has, as you know, put forward more money in the last few years. The bond commission's approved more brownfield money than ever in its history, and so that's been great for communities that are ready, willing, and able to take advantage of it. It puts us as a land bank in a tough spot, because we want to do all this stuff and take advantage of this money, but we don't have any staff, all these billions of dollars, and we don't have the capacity to acquire that money and put it to use in Eastern Connecticut. Hopefully we will soon.
Yeah, good. Thanks for that update. I think we probably do need to start getting moving along on our agenda, or if people feel like they want to continue brainstorming with the Eastern Connecticut Land Bank ideas, we could maybe make a special meeting next Friday or something to go over the rest of our agenda. I don't know what's everybody's feeling, because I know we're an hour and 20 minutes in.
I think we've covered this pretty well for now. It's definitely food for thought. Nothing's obviously going to happen quickly, so I think, leaving this on the agenda for next month, perhaps, just to touch base on a second time, see if anyone has any new thoughts.
Okay, and maybe in the meantime, if anybody has any good language or thoughts or something about our endorsement letter, it doesn't have to be like a full letter or anything, but if anybody has a couple good sentences or paragraphs of thoughts, maybe you can email them to Tira and I. We'll try to get together a letter.
Okay.
That's your homework. Everybody has homework now.
Well, if it's okay, I will sign off. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time and your input. I really appreciate it. Sorry to take up so much of your morning.
Oh, it was very important discussion, and we really appreciate all the things the land bank is trying to do, Wayne.
Well,
Thanks,
thank you very
Wayne.
much. Always a pleasure to see all of you. Have a nice weekend.
Okay, you too.
Take
Bye,
care.
Wayne.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So other members, do you want to continue on with this agenda or try to postpone it or go quick? What's your pleasure?
Well, let's touch base quickly, I think, if we
You
can.
have my undivided attention as long as you want it. How's that?
Oh, dear.
Is everybody else okay with just trying to get through the rest of the agenda? We just want to make sure we have a
Yes,
quorum
yes.
and people don't have to leave.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks for all your time. So the next item is B, development of 630 Riverside Drive.
Well, this item, I think, has the benefit of being a quick one in that there's nothing happening down there.
Okay, and let's go right on to C. revisions to the FEMA flood map. I think there definitely has been activity going on with this item. I think it's moving in a positive direction. In the last couple months, as Wayne, as the problem surfaced and we reviewed the maps at the town hall, one of our first public meetings, ultimately it resulted in FEMA releasing all their data, and then John Gumpert hired a consultant who owns all the software and is really familiar with, checking and evaluating how FEMA's consultant modeled the river through the site. And they found all kind of errors that, the floodplain should not, the 100-year flood should not be jumping up 7 feet. And so we're in a position that the town will appeal FEMA's draft map and their draft floodway. And I did submit that, deliver that letter to you guys from the consultant WMC that gets into the nitty gritty of the errors that were found in the analysis. So Tira, what else do you have to add?
Well, I don't have anything else to add yet. I need to ask Diane Ivkovic what I do with that now, in terms of the town actually making that appeal.
How to do the appeal.
Yeah.
Right, and first it has to be an appeal period. I think that's the one thing we're waiting for, but we do need to make sure, you're right, Tira, that the town is notified when the appeal period starts and when FEMA is accepting the appeals, because that's the process they said they would have to do. They received this letter from WMC. It kind of put them on alert, but they're not going to review it or take any action on it until the official appeal period opens.
Do we have any, does the town have any direct contact with WMC, or is it only through John Gumpert?
WMC was hired by Gumpert, so
Right, so, but
they're on his dime. I mean, I can email them, but
yeah, that's what I was kind of getting at. They're the ones who are going to know all about the appeal periods and how to handle it.
Yeah, no, they've been really good about carbon, about CCing Tira and I mean, they know that, like, I have an understanding of what's going on, and John seems to have no problem with us communicating with WMC and them sharing their findings with the town.
Then let's communicate with them and find out what, when, and how we need to deal with this.
I will follow up with them first thing next week.
Thank you, Tira.
Any other questions on that agenda item or comments? Okay, then we'll move on to 5D, the Blaine Road intersection, LID drainage.
Well, no real updates there either. Our last communication with Rich Janet, I think, was more or less the same. He's at this point moved it to early spring. I know he wants it to coincide with the sidewalks. We are still waiting for the approval or the authorization to advertise on the sidewalks. So it's all going to be interconnected, that process.
Right. And even further interconnected with one of the other grant item, I forget which.
Well, that's the next agenda item.
The very next agenda item. So why don't we just roll right into that?
So that's a good segue. So I think I sent you the draft yesterday of what I've started to work into the formal application for DECD. I sent in the 2-page intent to apply letter, which has a synopsis of it's a ton of elements, right, to do this sort of whole cloth plan. What I would be looking for on this one is maybe a little bit of assist in drafting some of this content, which I don't generally ask for. But because it is so complex, and because I have such limited space in the DECD forms themselves, trying to hit some of their points and communicate the value as they see them is going to be a little challenging. When I first saw this, the NOFA, or not the NOFA, when I first saw the the announcement about this grant come through, the way they were talking about it was that DECD was dying to give this money away to as many towns as they could. And I kind of had read between the lines to say, well, as long as you put in something vaguely competent, they're going to give towns $1 million each, right? With some exceptions here and there, which was still going to leave a whole bunch of towns out, right? Because they have $100 million to work with. There's 169 towns in Connecticut. If every one of them applied, 69 towns would be left out. Now, every town is not going to apply, but a lot of them will for sure. When the NOFA came out, the Notice of Funding Availability, and when I read the application, and this is a problem with DECD grant forms in general, and if Wayne was still on, he would concur, that they write in all kinds of contradictions into their grant applications. For example, in the priorities described for this grant program, they've got 6 or 7 bullet points. They talk about reusing existing properties, essential infrastructure to facilitate future development, public space and mobility improvements, right? Those things are all great. I can describe all of those elements, but if you go into the application, they're talking about how many jobs does that create? Well, a sidewalk improvement creates 0 permanent jobs. It has the potential down the line to create jobs because it's creating the conditions that, make communities appealing for investment, but there is no through line connection. So what I'm finding that I'm struggling with is trying to make what we're doing fit not only the spirit of what they describe as wanting in their priorities, but the letter of the application. So that's why I sent that stuff all around those various applications. So I'm open to your thoughts. I am working on it actively now, the application, and I've got until the 14th of January to submit my final. Don't all jump in at once.
I know. See, so much writing. I feel like writing is not my strong suit.
Well, I wouldn't even worry so much about the writing, the final writing. It's trying to identify the through lines, right? I can write anything once I have that. I just need a little more, I think, sounding board stuff here.
Okay, well, maybe, I was certainly willing to come to your office and brainstorm ideas for, we go through the topics and throw stuff out, and maybe other people would also be.
Yeah, that'd be super helpful to me on this one, just because I initially thought this is going to be a slam dunk, and I've gone from thinking it's going to be a slam dunk to thinking it's going to be a heavy lift. But I want to get this extra $1 million. I want to get it because everything that the Board of Selectmen voted on, which was based on community priorities, is structural in nature and not really developmentally oriented, right? So this is the other piece. Getting this extra $1 million will give us the other piece. Now, I will say
the Blaine Road intersection makes the whole mill site more attractive to development because the whole thing looks better. So that's job creation down the road if you want a real stretch.
Well, that's the thing. It's all a stretch, right? They've described 2 not exactly competing, but definitely tangential sets of priorities. Yeah. And the way their application is constructed, it really puts some of this stuff at a disadvantage because you don't get to describe the whole through line. Now, I have one strategy around that, which is, as one of the attachments, I'm essentially going to make one of my 100-page reports and I'm going to send it in. Here's all your feasibility stuff. Here's the through line, but that is skirting the way they've constructed their application. Now, I will say last week I was out of the office 3 days at 3 offsite meetings. At each one of those, at 2 of the 3 of those, and then in an email in between, I did corner the commissioner of DECD and essentially said everything I just said to you guys, like, hey, I think I see what you're trying to accomplish, but what you've written makes a huge donut hole between the bottom 25 towns whom you've already, said you're going to build an inequity portion for them, and that's appropriate. And the top, say, 30 or 40 towns who may have had the money to put into things like studies and soft costs. That leaves a donut hole of like 100 towns, right? So you're not reaching the kinds of distressed and disadvantaged communities that you think you are. And I think it was inadvertent. And he did seem to understand that. And he did say, oh, I've got to get out there to do a tour. So I'm going to follow up with him next week as well and say, hey, in this slow time around the holidays, why don't you come out to Thompson and I'll walk around here with you and show you exactly the kind of major, system-wide renovation that needs to be done here. To give it some context. Now, I don't even think the commissioner's on the review panel for these grants, but, putting those ideas out there in terms of what they think their goals are and how people are forced to try to, square peg round hole themselves into their applications, it's significant. I mean, I'm a really aggressive grant writer, and I will write this grant no matter what, but for communities that don't have somebody who is my equivalent, I would read this and go, well, they're not talking to me.
Right. Well, good. Well, good hard work, Tira.
So anybody who wants to come by over the next couple of weeks, please do.
Yeah, why don't you, yeah. So, I'll definitely come. I don't know whether it's more helpful to you if like half of us come at once or we come individually. What's more helpful to you?
I can work with anything. So, I think there's value in both. I think there's value in sitting around a table and having somebody advance an idea and somebody else say it could be better this way. And I think there's value to sitting down and tackling a couple of discrete elements. So either way, I've got a lot of time in December because of the way my calendar works out. So I'm just here.
Any thoughts, committee members? We could even have, it could be I suppose like a special committee meeting just to sit at the table and kick these ideas around. I don't know. Or if people just want to stop by and work with Tira one-on-one on a couple items. See, I can only see Bernie, so I can't tell what the rest of you are thinking. That's why I like it when people show their faces. What are you thinking? What are your thoughts? All I see is your names.
Well, maybe the brainstorming, the group. I don't know.
I think it's better as a group myself.
Well,
Yeah.
we could do that. We could do that next Friday. I do have a tourism district. Fridays are our days. I do have a tourism district at 9, meeting at 9 in the morning, and those usually go an hour and a half. They could go as long as 2. So anytime between 11 and 2 next Friday. I've got all day Monday open.
Well, I'll probably be pulling a Charlene next Friday and driving back from Vermont, and it's going to be hard to do with me behind the wheel. So
Right. No, sure.
I could come like next Friday at 11. I'm 90% sure that would be the 17th.
Yeah, and I'm totally open Monday. I have not a single thing on my calendar on Monday.
Yeah, I guess I could do Monday too.
Monday afternoon would
actually
be
not.
okay for me.
I beg your pardon?
Monday afternoon.
Okay, I can just hold my, what time do we want?
And yeah, if it's just a couple people, does it have to be a special meeting? If we just said Monday at 1, whoever's available?
I wouldn't even call it it's
Yeah.
just working
Not a
on
meeting, it's
a draft.
brainstorming.
Yeah.
Okay, how about Monday at 1?
You got it. It's in my book.
Tara, could you email Monday morning?
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, so anybody who's available will just meet in at the town hall and open up the grant.
I'm sorry. It's my mistake. I was thinking Zoom. No, we'll be north. I apologize.
I can I can set up the laptop so that you can
Okay,
yeah, so
Okay.
I'll and then we can do both.
Okay, so I'll come in person
Okay,
Monday at 1. And then we can just open up the grant application and go through some of these problematic, conflicting sections and brainstorm connections.
Yeah, so I'll work on it all morning on Monday so that I have even more in there than I've got now. And yeah,
Okay,
okay.
all right. So that believe takes us up to committee business F, Yukon Municipal Assistance Program.
yeah, so I would have a little less than a week to submit a request. And so I dropped that link in the agenda. If anybody thinks there is something in there, it's not like it's a hard form to fill out, but I did not myself see anything that screamed out, let's glom onto this. But maybe I'm being short-sighted. So that's why I sent it to you guys.
Okay, I'll take a look at it. I actually didn't.
Uh,
Is this the thing when,
along these lines with Yukon and their past assistance with the Blaine Road Bridge, is everyone aware that that bridge is imminent? That the preparation work is done?
yes.
Yeah, at the dam?
Yeah, oh yeah, last time I hiked up there, I was shocked to see the pedestrian bridge was under construction.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean the one on the USACE property?
I'm
Yes,
sorry,
yes.
the old Blaine Road crossing over the river.
Yeah, saw the foundations.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was excited. Okay, then G, any other committee business? Under MSRAC, we'll still go into the bar meeting and talk about our sidewalks, but any general MSRAC? And I guess hearing none, we can adjourn the MSRAC portion of the meeting at 10:38. And we will open the regular meeting of the bar grant subcommittee. So that meeting is called to order. We have, looks like 2 sets of minutes to approve.
Oh, no,
One-
that's a mistake. I'm sorry. I should have carried
Okay.
over the 15th October.
Okay, so we just will. Right, so it will be, so we'll need to change that, and the minutes are going to be the 15th of October, right? The special meeting.
Yeah.
Is
So
there any
moved.
motions? So Bernie moves to approve those special
Oh,
meeting minutes.
Second,
Norma
Okay.
seconds that. Any discussion? All in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
I
I'll abstain.
abstain.
I abstain.
Any opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. 3, correspondence. I don't believe there is any. 4, citizens' comments. I don't see any other citizens on our participant list. 5, committee business, A, lot SIP Route 12 sidewalk project.
Yeah, so I was expecting the authorization to advertise around Thanksgiving. It didn't come. I reached out to them again earlier this week or late last week. And it was confirmed that it is the final design, which was submitted by Jim Larkin at NECOG, according to their process, is under review for final comments on that.
Geez.
Then I know it goes on and on and on. You know, if we get the authorization to advertise before the end of the calendar year, that will be about exactly the same time that they informed us last year that we had been approved for the grant. So maybe that's their cycle. I don't know, but we have zero control.
There's no clock ticking, is there?
No.
Okay.
No, the only clock that you could consider to be ticking would be, you know, how quickly we can advertise to get a contractor locked in for spring season.
Right.
Right.
But
I
There's
mean, it
nothing
would
we
just,
can do
it
about
would
that.
be just like the state when they approved the grant and say you got 18 months to do this. And then the state takes 18 months to approve it, you know?
Well, the good thing, and it's the good thing about the bar grant too, because we are well over our bar grant performance period. I
Right.
can't submit my last two bills because I haven't received the last one from Freeman, and
Right.
DECD wanted to pay everything over the performance period out at once. Now Freeman knows that, so I've been sitting on a bill for like 6 months. It's a small one, and we'll have another small one, but then the bar grant will finally be closed and we'll be
Right.
moving on to the lot SIP.
Right.
Right. Yeah, yep. I mean, I think Freeman will jump when we get that authorization to advertise letter, because we are at a time now, but we need to jump and line up good prices for the spring. So
Yep.
okay. Then, and of course, that goes right along with the inspection consultant RFP. That cannot go out until the project is publicly up for bid, because that's how the consultants are going to look at the scope of the project and understand, how many linear feet it is and what's involved in it. So I guess we are up to item B, John Gumpert, Liaison Rivermill.
I guess that's you and me, Janet.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, the FEMA stuff, is as distressing as it is that they have such an egregious error. It is encouraging that John, again, he put his money where his mouth is. He hired a consultant, and I think the town and his attorney and his engineers, everybody's working together to get this issue resolved.
So I will say some stuff here relative to the grant that I submitted on behalf of Rivermill and the town for the brownfield cleanup to DECD, which we do expect to be funded. DECD came back with some supplemental questions, including, I must say, a question that has been troubling me for quite some time, as anybody who's heard me grumble knows, which is that there was never any affordable housing set aside in this project. I am pleased to report that because it is a priority for DECD, John has agreed to set aside 10% of the units to scale to affordable housing of 80% of AMI, which is the top threshold that you can include and still sort of get those credits. But to me, that was a lot of progress because it's been bothering me all along that there was never any component to that included.
Do you think these will be additional units not in the original plan, or
No.
20% of the original units?
10% of the original
10%.
units, 10%
Yeah.
of the original units. So 30-ish, depending on how many his final count are.
Yeah.
Which would be deed restricted as limited to people making no more than 80% of area median income. They would have to be income qualified, credit checked, all of those things.
Yep.
And that restriction is in place for 40 years in order to count. So that benefits the project, increases the likelihood that they'll get their brownfield cleanup funding, and boosts the town's affordable housing stock by a minuscule amount, but a boost is a boost.
I have a question or
Yep.
a comment. So I'm involved in a couple of other things, and while it is good to see affordable housing, I know there's other places, not in Thompson, that allow or have to have the low income, 10% or whatever people in there. And so I don't know if there's anything that you can do. I know you can't discriminate or do anything like that, but one of them is an elderly unit, housing unit. And one of the houses that these people are in, there's drug use, there's cops are being called there. They're more of while we're trying to help them and society, they're not really participating well. And people in the elderly place are afraid to go there. They don't even want to be on a list there. So
I would think the credit check that John's people would do would have a lot to do to help avert that from occurring. What do you think, Kira?
Yeah, so, this gets to some common notions about affordable housing versus low income housing versus subsidized housing. So affordable, and we just did the affordable housing plan for the town too. Affordable just means housing that people can afford, right? And based on your area median income. So if you're talking about a set aside in the River Mill, particularly, starting at 80% of area median income is $77,000 a year. So that means you're talking about somebody making around 65. Well, that's what I make a year, right? So people need to wrap their heads around the idea that affordable housing does not de facto mean
Low income.
Section 8 or low income. It can include that. But what is also generally demonstrated to be true is that where low income housing developments are most problematic is when they are fundamentally segregated by income level, meaning an entire development is set aside for people at a certain income scale. And when that happens, because you are concentrating people with structural challenges in their lives, those problems compound on one another. Whereas in a mixed income development, which is what the trend is mostly for, especially for capital A affordable housing, as opposed to those other categories, all you're saying is that everybody has a chance to live in a nice building. And if they're interspersed, it is much less likely that those challenges follow into the development, because you've got, neighbors who are less challenged, who are taking more care of their property. It's much harder for an entire development to fall into that kind of disrepair. In the case of the River Mill as well, remember, you're talking about a closed building. These aren't detached homes. They're not, it's not like exterior access. It's going to have a building manager. Again, the residents are going to be credit checked. And there are other ways to do that too, getting to one of Shirlene's other points, which is you can do it by having set-asides for seniors. Now, I tend not to favor doing age-related set-asides for the same reason I don't favor other kinds of segregated housing. I think it creates housing that may be harder to fill later, and it creates communities that are sort of unnatural. Like, what natural community has all old people living in it? That's not a natural development pattern. A natural development pattern is, people of varied incomes, people of varied age levels in life in a neighborhood, so that some neighbors are watching out for other neighbors, yada, yada. And you can go on about that forever. So that's a long-winded answer to your question, Charlene. The basic answer is that by, in this case, making the threshold 80% of AMI as the entry level, you're really not hitting what you would call a low income population. You're just hitting a working class population.
Charlene, does that cover your concerns? Which were a good point, by the way.
It sounds good, but I'm even thinking of Gladys Green. Like, when my grandfather was alive, that was for elderly, and they felt safe there. They were secure. They could all go out. And as it's switching over and there's 28-year-olds in there, they just don't feel as safe. So I guess, like, while I'm concerned about income level and I didn't think poverty would live in there, but that could be an option. But I'm just wondering what if I make 150,000 and I'm buying a River Mill apartment to live, my thought is something different. And if it all works out and 65,000 income people act like normal people, I guess we're good. But if you have people that it sounds like I'm kind of segregating, but I'm really not. It's a problem. Like, I know one and it's inside of a building. The apartments are all inside and the cops are there all the time. And there was credit checks and and that might be low income, but Gladys Green is, you have to do a credit check there. You have to prove your income, social security. So I'm just concerned like what the feeling is gonna look like to somebody who's gonna be buying a spot there.
I guess.
Yeah, the best I can do is refer you to the mill conversion development that they did in Windsor Locks last year. And they had very robust affordability set asides from 80% of AMI all the way down to 25% of AMI. And that building is beautiful. It's fully occupied. It's well managed. You know, some of those things are on the developer and their management company, right? To address problem tenants. Gladys Green is in a different situation because the younger people who are living there are not in there because they're income qualified. They're in there because they are disability qualified. That is an
Oh.
elderly plus disability community. So anybody in there who's younger than 55 plus is in there because they have some kind of persistent medical, mental health, whatever issue. So, you know, behavioral and developmental problems are behavioral and developmental problems. You know, and for a community which is otherwise geared towards the elderly, you can understand how, again, by having these isolated types of communities, you've got a development where there are fewer sort of responsible neighbors who are able to take up the slack for the income challenged seniors.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think it's like an apples versus oranges situation to compare 10% affordable housing at the mill to a project that's completely like for disabled and elderly. Yeah, I think that they're completely different in my mind. But again, I agree. I think Charlene's concerns are well taken, and
I think they represent some concerns that a lot of people have and express. So they have to be addressed. But, you know, from a municipal point of view, we do not have a sufficient stock of affordable housing to make us not vulnerable in the 830G appeals process. And until we reach that 10% threshold, we will always be vulnerable as a municipality in that way. So I am leaning on any developer who is proposing multifamily housing of any kind to include some kind of affordability set aside, even if it is as high as 80% of AMI.
you said something else that intrigued me. You're pretty sure that DECD is going to fund the cleanup grant of the river mill? You're getting good vibes on that grant application?
We've always had good feelings about that because
Okay.
DECD is massively invested philosophically and financially in this project already. I'd be really surprised if we don't get funding.
Okay. They did raise the issue of the floodplain. I thought that was an interesting question. When you had the conference call with them, did that seem to be something they raised in passing, or were they really concerned about it?
I think that the appeal from WMC will, or the appeal that WMC's research will enable will resolve that.
Okay.
They also do, not that we want to go in this direction, they also do have the ability to make that award contingent on certain things. So they could do a take backsies. No, we don't want that. But if it really doesn't resolve itself, they can recall it.
Okay. All right. Then does anybody have any other committee business regarding the bar grant? Item 6, member comments. Oops, Steve, go ahead.
No, I just said no.
So any member comments before we adjourn?
No.
No?
Not for me.
Okay. Well, next, since we did this December meeting on Zoom, I've committed that next in January, we will have an in-person meeting, and that way the people who have different preferences, everybody can get a, a chance. So so we'll see whoever who wants to come Monday at 1 to talk about the other grant, and otherwise we'll see everybody in January.
All right.
So I guess we'll adjourn.
Bye, everybody. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Have a good
Happy New
weekend.
Year.
Bye-bye.
Happy New Year. Merry Christmas.
Yeah, you too, Jen.